Welcome back to part 2 of this story that has all of us in our feelings. If you're just joining us, stop. Go watch part 1 first. Link in the description, because what's about to happen will hit different when you know everything that came before. For those of you who've been riding with us from the beginning, type ready in the comments. Let me know you're here for this next chapter. Because Alexander Harrington just had the perfect date with Aaliyah. He confessed his feelings. She confessed hers. For one beautiful moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, love could survive the lies. But now Maya's on the phone, and what she's about to say will change everything. Let's dive back in. Hello. Mr. Alex? It's Maya. Her voice was weak, strained. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to tell you something. About Aaliyah, about what she's done for me, about... She broke off, coughing. Maya? Are you okay? The thing is, she's going to lose everything trying to save me. Her job, her savings, her dreams, all of it. And I won't let her do that anymore. So I'm stopping treatment. What? No, you can't. I've already told the doctors. As of tomorrow, I'm done. She'll be furious, but at least she'll have a chance at a life. At happiness. Maybe with you. Maya's voice broke. Please take care of her when I'm gone. Please. The call ended. Alexander sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, as the full weight of the situation crashed down. Maya was giving up. Aaliyah would be destroyed. And he had the power to fix it all. $50,000 was nothing to him, less than nothing, but doing so would expose everything. Unless he found another way. He pulled up his computer, started typing emails. To his lawyer, to his accountant, to his assistant. By dawn, he'd created an anonymous fund, a medical grant that Maya would miraculously qualify for, donated by a wealthy benefactor who wished to remain unnamed. It wasn't perfect, Aaliyah would have questions, but it would save Maya's life without revealing his identity. At 6 a.m., he called the hospital's administration, using his Alexander voice, his CEO authority, and made sure the grant would be processed immediately. By 7, Maya's treatment was secured. By 8, Aaliyah was calling him, crying so hard she could barely speak. Alex, something, I don't understand. Maya's treatment, it's covered all of it, some anonymous donation, and I don't know how or why, but she's going to live. That's incredible, Alexander said, his heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. She must have an angel looking out for her. I wish I knew who it was so I could thank them. So I could tell them they saved my whole world. I'm sure they know. After they hung up, Alexander stood in his penthouse, still in yesterday's clothes, exhausted and wired and terrified. He'd saved Maya. He'd bought Aaliyah's happiness. But he'd also dug himself deeper into deception, created more lies that would eventually unravel. His phone buzzed. Aaliyah again, this time a text. Can you meet me at the diner? I need to see you. I need to tell you something. He shouldn't go. He should stay away, let the anonymous donation be enough, start extracting himself before the lies became completely unsalvageable. Instead, he showered, changed back into his Alex disguise, and drove to the diner. She was waiting outside, pacing, her face radiant with joy and relief. When she saw him, she ran to him, threw her arms around his neck. She's going to be okay. My sister is going to be okay. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the feeling of her in his arms. I'm so happy for you. I got the job here too. Bernie called. Apparently the corporate office is backing off. No more threats of closure or layoffs. It's like everything is suddenly falling into place. She pulled back, looked up at him with those incredible eyes. It's because of you. I know it is. Ever since you came into my life, everything's been changing. If only she knew how right she was. Aaliyah, His phone rang, cutting him off. Victoria's number. He declined it. She called again immediately. You should get that, Aaliyah said, stepping back. It's not important. Alex. Her expression shifted, became more guarded. You keep getting these calls, these urgent interruptions. And you get this look on your face, like you're carrying the weight of something huge. What aren't you telling me? Nothing. It's just. Don't lie to me. Please. I've been lied to before, and I can feel when someone's hiding something. This was it. The moment he should come clean, should tell her everything and face whatever consequences came. His mouth opened, the truth right there on his tongue. And then Bernie appeared in the diner's doorway, his expression grim. "Aaliyah, corporate's here. They want to see you. Now." Her face went pale. "What? Why?" "I don't know. But you should probably—" Bernie's gaze flicked to Alexander, then back to Aaliyah. "You should probably come inside." She squeezed Alexander's hand once, then followed Bernie into the diner. Through the window, Alexander watched as she disappeared into the back office. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "What did you do?" Victoria's voice was ice. "What are you talking about?" "The hospital donation. The corporate directive to leave the diner alone. The anonymous grant that conveniently appeared this morning. You think I'm stupid? I think you made a deal. I kept my end. By manipulating circumstances. By playing God in her life. That wasn't part of our agreement. Our agreement was that you leave her alone. You are. That's all that matters. You're obsessed with her. Dangerously so. And now I'm wondering if this entire situation is more volatile than I initially calculated." Victoria's voice dropped. "I'm at the diner. With a representative from corporate. We're having a conversation with your little waitress about some concerns regarding her relationship with customers. Nothing actionable, just concerning patterns." Alexander's blood ran cold. "Victoria, we had a deal. And I'm honoring it. She's not being fired, not being harassed. Just being informed that fraternizing with regular customers can create liability issues. Very professional, very by the book. She'll understand, I'm sure. If you're there too. Come see for yourself. I'm happy to meet the real you, darling. Or should I say, introduce Aaliyah to the real you." The line went dead. Alexander stood on the sidewalk, frozen by decision paralysis. If he went inside, if Victoria saw him in his disguise, she could expose everything right there. But if he didn't go in, if he let Victoria spin whatever web she was weaving. Through the window, he saw Aaliyah emerge from the back office. Her face was pale, confused. Bernie was talking to her, gesturing. And there, standing in the corner in a perfectly tailored suit and predatory smile, was Victoria Langford. Their eyes met through the glass, Alexander's and Victoria's, and she raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow in challenge. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything. Walk away, protect his cover, let Victoria think she'd won. Or go inside and reveal the truth, consequences be damned. Alexander reached for the diner's door handle. And from behind him, a voice, "Mr. Harrington? Is that you?" He turned. One of his junior executives, someone from accounting, staring at him in confusion. "Sir, what are you doing here? And why are you dressed like?" Inside the diner, Aaliyah was looking toward the door, toward the commotion. Toward him. Victoria was moving toward the window, her smile widening. The junior executive was pulling out his phone, about to call someone, alert someone. And Alexander Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises, billionaire heir to an empire, man of carefully constructed lies and desperate truths, had exactly 3 seconds to decide who he wanted to be. The door to the diner opened. Aaliyah stepped out, her eyes landing on him, then on the executive, confusion clouding her features. "Alex? What's going on? Who is this person calling you?" She stopped, reading something in his expression. "What did he just call you?" Victoria appeared in the doorway behind her, victorious and cold. "Hello, darling," Victoria said, her voice carrying over the street noise. "Shall we tell her together? Or would you prefer to explain to Aaliyah who you really are?" Time seemed to fracture into 1,000 shards of broken glass, each one reflecting a different version of the truth Aaliyah thought she knew. She stood on the sidewalk outside the diner, the morning sun suddenly too bright, too harsh, illuminating details she'd been too blind to see before. The man she knew as Alex stood frozen, his face a mask of guilt and resignation. Beside him, a junior executive in an expensive suit was stammering something about quarterly reports. And behind her, framed in the diner's doorway like a portrait of calculated cruelty, stood a woman Aaliyah had never seen before. Ice blonde hair. Designer suit that probably cost more than Aaliyah made in 6 months. A smile that held no warmth, only victory. "I'm Victoria Langford," the woman said, her voice smooth as poisoned honey. "Alexander Harrington's fiancée. And you are?" The name hit Aaliyah like a physical blow. Alexander Harrington. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Billionaire CEO, heir to the Harrington Empire, the kind of untouchable wealth that existed in magazines and penthouse offices, not in rundown diners serving coffee to struggling writers. Alexander. Aaliyah's voice came out strangled, confused. She looked at the man she'd been falling for, the man who'd held her while she cried, who'd kissed her last night like she was the only woman in the world. "This is Alex. There's been a mistake." "No mistake, sweetheart." Victoria descended the steps with predatory grace, each click of her heels against concrete sounding like a countdown. "Show her, Alexander. Or should I?" The man Aaliyah knew as Alex, gentle, struggling, kind, pulled off his baseball cap with shaking hands. And suddenly she saw it. The expensive watch he'd claimed was fake. The way he spoke, carefully choosing words like someone translating from a more educated vocabulary. The car he'd explained away as borrowed. The restaurant last night that was far too upscale for a freelance writer's budget. All of it. Lies. Every single moment. "Aaliyah," he said, and even his voice sounded different now, more cultured, the careful disguise falling away. "I can explain. Please just let me." "Who are you?" The question came out as a whisper, barely audible over the morning traffic. "Who are you really?" "Alexander Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises." Each word seemed to cost him something, his face pale and drawn. "I came to the diner undercover. It was supposed to be research for an acquisition, just business, but then I met you and everything changed." An acquisition. Aaliyah's mind was spinning, trying to process information that didn't want to fit together. "You were buying the diner? You were investigating. I was what? Research." "No. God, no. At first, maybe, but the moment I talked to you, the moment I saw who you really were." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, this is precious. Alexander, darling, you're making it worse. Let me help." She turned to Aaliyah with mock sympathy. "He does this. Plays pretend, slums it with regular people to feel something real. His father did it too, destroyed women for entertainment. Like father, like son." Aaliyah felt something inside her chest crack wide open, all the carefully constructed walls she'd built after Marcus, all the defenses she'd lowered for this man who'd seemed so genuine, so safe. "You have a fiancé. This whole time, you had a fiancé. It's not a real engagement. It's business, arranged by our families. Stop. Just stop." Aaliyah backed away, her hands coming up like she could physically ward off the truth. "I trusted you. I told you things I've never told anyone. About Maya, about my parents, about Marcus." Her voice broke. "I let you in. My feelings were real." Alexander stepped toward her, desperate, reaching out. "Everything I felt for you, every moment we spent together, that was all real. I love you, Aaliyah." The words should have meant something. Should have been the declaration she'd secretly hoped for during those late-night conversations, those stolen moments. Instead, they felt like another knife sliding between her ribs. "Get out." Her voice was steady now, cold, all the warmth drained away. "Both of you. Get out of my sight. Aaliyah, please. Now." The word ripped out of her, raw and jagged. Customers inside the diner were staring. Bernie had come to the door, his expression horrified. The junior executive was backing away, phone pressed to his ear, no doubt calling someone important about this disaster. Victoria took Alexander's arm, proprietary and possessive. "Come along, darling. I think we're done here." Aaliyah watched them walk away, Victoria's expensive heels clicking confidently, Alexander's shoulders hunched like a man walking to his execution. She stood there until they disappeared around the corner, until the junior executive scurried off to his own car, until the audience of curious onlookers grew bored and returned to their breakfasts. Then, and only then, did she allow herself to collapse. Bernie caught her before she hit the sidewalk, his gruff hand surprisingly gentle. "Easy there. Come on, let's get you inside." She let him guide her to the storage room, the same place where where that liar had held her just yesterday, had promised her she wasn't alone. The irony was crushing. She sank to the floor among the boxes of supplies, and the sobs came in waves that threatened to drown her. Everything had been a lie. Every conversation, every shared moment, every touch. He'd been playing a role, slumming it with a poor waitress, probably laughing about it with his fiancée over expensive wine in their expensive penthouse. And she'd believed him. Worse, she'd started to love him. How could she have been so stupid? How could she have let her guard down after Marcus, after she'd sworn never to be vulnerable again? The answer was simple and devastating, because Alexander had seemed different. Because he'd listened like he genuinely cared. Because for the first time in years, she'd felt seen. And it had all been an elaborate performance. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands, hoping irrationally that it might be him, that he might have some explanation that could make this okay. It wasn't him. It was her bank overdraft notice. Negative balance. She stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the numbers. She'd had $1,200 2 days ago. But there were charges she didn't recognize, fees she hadn't authorized. Another notification. Email from her landlord. Eviction notice, 30 days. Rent was overdue by a week, and apparently he decided he'd been patient enough. And then her phone rang. Maya's hospital. Ms. Thompson? This is Dr. Chen. I'm calling about your sister's treatment schedule. We need to discuss the next phase immediately. The window for optimal intervention is narrowing. Aaliyah pressed her hand to her mouth, forcing back another sob. I thought, the anonymous donation. That covered the initial treatment phase. But we're talking about ongoing care now. Another $40,000 for the next 6 months of therapy. Without it, the progress we've made could reverse. The world tilted. Everything was falling apart at once, like dominoes arranged by a cruel god. Her job was probably gone. She couldn't imagine coming back here after that scene. Her savings were evaporated. Her rent was overdue. And Maya needed money Aaliyah had no way of getting. I'll find it, she heard herself say. I'll figure something out. After Dr. Chen hung up, Aaliyah sat in the storage room, staring at her phone's contact list. There was only one person she could think of who might have money to lend. One person who'd offered to help before, even if his help came with strings attached. Marcus. Her finger hovered over his name, shame burning in her throat like acid. 2 years ago, he'd cheated on her with a coworker named Jessica, had lied to her face for months before she'd caught them together. She deleted his number immediately after, sworn she'd never speak to him again. But she'd saved it in her contacts a few months later, tucked away under a fake name, just in case. Just in case Maya needed something and Aaliyah had no other options. This was that moment. She pressed call before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the third ring, his voice surprised and wary. Aaliyah? That really you? I need help. The words tasted like poison. I need to borrow money. It's for Maya, she's sick, and I'll pay you back, I swear. Whoa, slow down. How much we talking? 40,000. Marcus whistled low. That's serious money, babe. I don't know if I can just. Please. I'm desperate. Name your terms, I'll agree to anything. The silence on the other end stretched too long, took on a quality that made Aaliyah's skin crawl. Anything. Marcus's voice had changed, become something oily and suggestive. Because I might be willing to help, but you'd have to make it worth my while. You know what I mean. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. You're not serious. I'm always serious about investments. You want my money, you gotta give me something in return. We were good together, Aaliyah. We could be again. She hung up, her hand shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. The tears came again, hot and furious. This was what her life had become, begging her cheating ex-boyfriend for help while he propositioned her like she was something to be bought. The rest of the day passed in a blur of humiliation and desperation. Aaliyah applied to 7 different jobs online, each one requiring her to smile for a phone interview, to pretend she was confident and capable when she felt like she was drowning. 3 payday loan companies, their interest rates so predatory they made her stomach turn, but what choice did she have? By evening, she'd been rejected from 4 jobs, No reason given, just polite form emails thanking her for her interest. The payday loan companies wanted collateral she didn't have or credit scores she couldn't meet. And Bernie had pulled her aside during the afternoon shift with an expression that told her everything she needed to know. "Aaliyah, I'm sorry. Corporate called. With everything that happened this morning, the publicity, they want you gone. I fought for you, I really did, but it's out of my hands." So that was it. Unemployed. Broke. Facing eviction. And her sister's life hanging in the balance. Aaliyah walked home through Chicago's streets as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. She'd never felt more alone in her life. The city that had been her home for 28 years suddenly felt hostile, indifferent to her suffering. When she finally reached her apartment building, there was an official-looking notice taped to her door. Final eviction warning. She had 2 weeks to pay or vacate. She crumpled it in her fist and went inside, where Maya was sleeping on the couch, looking slightly better than she had in weeks. The anonymous treatment was working. Her sister was getting stronger, while Aaliyah's world collapsed around her. Across the city, in a penthouse that cost more per month than most people made in a year, Alexander Harrington was experiencing his own kind of collapse. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't focus on the mountain of work that had piled up during his 3-month absence from reality. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Aaliyah's face, the way it had crumbled when Victoria revealed the truth, the devastation in her eyes when she'd realized the depth of his deception. He tried calling her 17 times. She'd blocked his number after the 3rd call. He'd texted from different phones. Blocked again. He'd even considered showing up at her apartment but realized it would only make things worse, would feel like harassment, like he was using his privilege to force his way into her life. Victoria had won. She destroyed the one real thing Alexander had ever felt, and she'd done it efficiently, publicly, leaving no room for repair. "You're wallowing," Victoria said from the doorway of his home office. She'd let herself in with the key he still hadn't taken back, was watching him with something that might have been pity if she were capable of such an emotion. "It's beneath you. Get out. We need to discuss the board meeting tomorrow. Jonathan Steele has been asking questions about your absence, about your judgment." I said get out. Alexander stood, and something in his expression must have been dangerous because Victoria actually took a step back. "You got what you wanted. You destroyed her. Now leave me alone. I saved you from yourself." Victoria's voice was cold, clinical. "You were spiraling, becoming obsessed with someone completely inappropriate. In a month, you'll thank me. In a month, I'll hate you exactly as much as I do right now. Which is more than I thought I was capable of feeling." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You're not your father, Alexander. No matter how much you try to be." He at least understood that power requires sacrifice. After she left, Alexander returned to his desk, to the reports he couldn't read and the emails he couldn't answer. His assistant had sent a polite reminder about the board meeting tomorrow, a routine quarterly review that now felt ominous in ways he couldn't quite name. He pulled up Aaliyah's social media, something he'd done approximately every 30 minutes since the disastrous confrontation. Her accounts were private now, locked down. No updates, no photos, no window into whether she was okay. On impulse, he called Bernie at the diner. The old man answered gruffly, clearly annoyed. "What do you want, Harrington?" Is she working today?" "She's gone. You know that. You're the reason she's gone." Bernie's voice was hard, unforgiving. "Corporate fired her because of the scene you caused. And honestly, after what you did, good riddance to you." The line went dead. Alexander sat in the silence of his penthouse, surrounded by luxury he'd never earned, wealth he'd never needed, and realized with crushing clarity that he destroyed the only person who'd ever made him feel like something other than his father's disappointing legacy. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer. "We need to talk. Urgently. Don't go to the board meeting tomorrow without calling me first." But Alexander was too numb to care about corporate intrigue, too hollowed out to worry about whatever political games were being played. All he could think about was Aaliyah, somewhere in this city, probably hating him with the same intensity he'd once hoped she might love him. The board meeting the next morning was a masterclass in betrayal disguised as corporate governance. Alexander walked into the conference room to find the full board assembled, 12 members, all in their expensive suits, all wearing expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, her posture perfect, her smile serene. And beside her, looking like a shark that had just scented blood in the water, was Jonathan Steele. Jonathan was 60, silver-haired, with a kind of ruthless ambition that had built fortunes and destroyed competitors. He'd been on the Harrington Enterprises board since before Alexander's father died, had voted against Alexander's appointment as CEO, and had been waiting ever since for an opportunity to prove his skepticism justified. Apparently, that opportunity had arrived. "Gentlemen," Jonathan began, his voice smooth and practiced, and Victoria, of course. "Thank you for making time for this emergency session. I know it's irregular, but given recent events, I believe it's necessary." Alexander remained standing, his hands braced on the back of his chair. "What recent events?" "Your extended absence from the company. Your undercover stint at a subsidiary property. Your inappropriate relationship with an employee-adjacent individual." Jonathan pulled out a folder, began distributing papers around the table, all of which demonstrate a pattern of emotional compromise and reckless judgment unbefitting a CEO of this company's stature. The papers were damning: photos of Alexander as Alex, time-stamped documentation of his 3-month absence from board meetings, financial reports showing decisions that had been delayed or mishandled during his disappearance. And there, in full color, photos of him and Aaliyah at the restaurant, holding hands, looking at each other with unmistakable intimacy. "This is a witch hunt," Alexander said quietly. "This is accountability." Jonathan's smile was cold. "You abandoned your responsibilities to play dress-up. You pursued a romantic relationship while engaged to a company vice president, creating potential legal and PR nightmares. And you've shown a fundamental lack of judgment that calls into question your ability to lead." Alexander looked around the table, trying to gauge who might be on his side. Most of the board members avoided his eyes. They'd never fully trusted him anyway, had always seen him as Theodore Harrington's disappointing son, too soft to wield real power. His gaze landed on Victoria. She met his eyes, and for just a moment, something flickered in her expression. Guilt? Satisfaction? It was gone too quickly to name. "I'd like to call a vote," Jonathan said. "Motion to remove Alexander Harrington as CEO of Harrington Enterprises, effective immediately." "Seconded," said another board member, Martin Chun, who'd been Theodore's closest ally. "All in favor?" Hands went up around the table. One by one, the board members who'd sat in these chairs for decades, who'd pretended to respect Alexander's leadership, voted to remove him. 7 hands. 8. 9. Victoria's hand rose slowly, almost reluctantly. But it rose. "Victoria." Alexander's voice was hollow. "You orchestrated this." "I'm doing what's best for Harrington Enterprises," she said, her tone maddeningly calm. "Your judgment has been compromised. The company needs stable leadership." "Stable leadership." Alexander laughed, a sound without humor. "You mean you and Jonathan? How long have you two been planning this coup?" "This isn't a coup. It's a correction." Victoria stood, smoothed her skirt. "I wish it hadn't come to this, Alexander. Truly. But you brought it on yourself." The vote was final, 10-2 in favor of removal. Alexander Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises for 5 years, was stripped of his position in less than 15 minutes. Jonathan would serve as interim CEO while the board conducted a search for permanent replacement. Victoria would remain as vice president, her power effectively doubled now that Alexander was neutered. "You're still a board member," Jonathan said as the meeting adjourned, his tone suggesting this was a consolation prize. "You'll retain your shares, your voting rights. Just not operational control." Alexander didn't respond. He gathered his things and walked out of the conference room, out of the building that bore his family name, feeling like a ghost in his own life. In his car, sitting in the parking garage, he finally called his lawyer back. "I warned you this was coming," Richard said without preamble. "Victoria's been building this case for weeks. She and Jonathan have been meeting privately, consolidating board support. I need you to dig into everything Victoria's done. Every deal, every transaction, every conversation. I want ammunition." "Alexander, a corporate war right now is." "I don't care. She used me. The engagement, the company position, It was all a power play. I want proof. Richard sighed. I'll start immediately. But this will get ugly. It's already ugly. After hanging up, Alexander sat in the darkness of the parking garage, his mind spiraling back to a memory he'd suppressed for years. His mother on her deathbed, her hand frail in his, her voice barely a whisper. Your father broke me because he could, she'd said, her eyes distant with morphine and grief. He lied, he cheated, he destroyed women for sport. And the worst part? He thought it made him strong. Promise me, Alexander. Promise me you won't become him. He'd promised. He'd sworn he would be different, better, that he'd never use his power to hurt someone weaker. And then he'd lied to Aaliyah for 3 months. He'd hidden behind a false identity, had manipulated her emotions, had made her trust him while concealing the truth of who he was. When Victoria had threatened to destroy her, he'd made backroom deals instead of simply telling Aaliyah the truth and letting her choose. I am him, Alexander whispered to the empty car. I'm exactly like him. The realization was devastating. All his careful attempts to be different, to honor his mother's memory, to build a legacy separate from his father's cruelty, all of it had been a lie. When tested, when it mattered most, he'd made the same choices Theodore Harrington would have made. He drove home in a daze, poured himself a drink he didn't want, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. Meanwhile, across the city, Aaliyah's life was taking an unexpected turn. She'd spent the morning at yet another job interview, a retail position at a clothing store that paid barely above minimum wage. The manager had seemed interested until she'd run Aaliyah's references. Then her expression had shifted, become cooler, more distant. I'm sorry, the manager had said. We've decided to go in a different direction. It was the 7th rejection in 3 days. Someone was blacklisting her, making sure she couldn't get hired anywhere in the city. Aaliyah didn't need a detective to guess who was behind it. She'd returned to her apartment exhausted and hopeless, ready to start researching whether she could move to another city, start over somewhere Victoria Langford's influence didn't reach. But there, sitting on her doorstep, was a package. No return address. Just her name written in elegant script. Inside was a single business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, Luminaire Fashion House. And underneath, a handwritten note, we've heard about your talent. Interview tomorrow, 9 a.m. Your designs were impressive. Helena Rousseau, creative director. Aaliyah stared at the card, her heart pounding. She'd heard of Luminaire, every aspiring designer in Chicago had. They were high-end, prestigious, the kind of place that launched careers. But she'd never submitted her designs anywhere. Her sketches had been private, hidden under her bed, shared with no one. Except. The memory hit her like a freight train. Alexander, lingering in her apartment the one time she'd let him visit, 3 weeks ago. She'd been in the bathroom for just a few minutes. When she'd come back, he'd been sitting on her bed, looking guilty about something but covering it with a smile. He'd seen the sketchbook. He must have photographed pages when she wasn't looking. Aaliyah's hands clenched around the business card, anger and something else, something dangerously close to hope, warring in her chest. He had no right. Her designs were personal, private, not his to share without permission. But also, this was Luminaire. This was her dream, handed to her on a silver platter by the man who'd broken her heart. She should throw the card away. Should refuse to go, refuse to accept anything from Alexander Harrington, even indirectly. Instead, she found herself researching interview tips, pulling together a portfolio from her sketches, trying to calm the nervous energy that felt like lightning in her veins. The next morning, dressed in the best clothes she owned, Aaliyah walked into Luminaire's downtown offices. The space was everything she'd imagined, minimalist, elegant, with racks of stunning designs and mood boards covering every wall. Helena Rousseau was a woman in her 50s, French accent still strong despite decades in America, with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through people. She greeted Aaliyah warmly, then got straight to business. Your designs, Helena said, spreading Aaliyah's photograph sketches across her desk. They're extraordinary. Fresh perspective, strong technical skill, and most importantly, vision. You see something the industry needs. I thank you. But I have to ask, how did you get these? I never submitted them. Helena smiled knowingly. A mutual acquaintance sent them. Anonymously, but not so anonymous I couldn't trace it back. Someone who believed in your talent enough to risk your anger by sharing your work without permission. Alexander Harrington. Helena neither confirmed nor denied. What matters is the work. And your work is remarkable. I'd like to offer you a position as junior designer. Starting salary is $120,000, full benefits, access to our production facilities and mentorship program. The number was staggering. More money than Aaliyah had ever imagined making, enough to pay Maya's medical bills, cover rent, maybe even save for the future. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you're available. Aaliyah should have hesitated, should have demanded to know more about Alexander's involvement, should have protected herself from whatever game he might be playing. But Maya needed her treatment. Aaliyah needed to eat, to keep a roof over their heads. I accept. Helena's smile widened. Excellent. One thing though, the person who submitted your work asked me to tell you something. He said, "This is your talent, not my money. You earned this. I just opened a door you deserve to walk through." Aaliyah's throat tightened with emotions she didn't want to name. That evening, she sat in Maya's hospital room, watching her sister sleep peacefully, the monitors showing steady improvement. The mysterious treatment donation, the job opportunity, both bore Alexander's fingerprints, even if he tried to hide them. "I hate that I need him," Aaliyah whispered to the sleeping girl. "I hate that he's fixing things. But I also hate that I can't hate him completely." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congrats on the job. You're going to do amazing things." She should block the number. Should delete the message. Instead, she stared at it for 5 minutes before finally typing a response. "You had no right to submit my designs. But thank you. I don't know what else to say." 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. Then disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to have a chance at your dreams. That's all I ever wanted." Aaliyah closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her chest. How was she supposed to move on when he kept doing things like this? When he kept proving that maybe, underneath all the lies, there had been something real. While Aaliyah wrestled with her confusion, Alexander was in his lawyer's office, staring at a mountain of evidence that made his stomach turn. Richard had been thorough. Documents covered every surface: financial records, emails, meeting minutes, photographs. Victoria's corruption was extensive and well hidden, but Alexander's investigative team had found it all. She'd been taking kickbacks from contractors for years, steering Harrington Enterprises' business toward companies owned by her family. She'd embezzled through creative accounting, small amounts that added up to millions over time. She'd manipulated stock prices through insider trading, had blackmailed board members into supporting her initiatives. And the alliance with Jonathan Steele? That went back 2 years, to before Theodore Harrington's death. They'd been planning this takeover for longer than Alexander had been CEO. "This is enough to remove her from the board," Richard said. "Possibly enough for criminal charges." Alexander flipped through the documents, feeling sick. She used me. The engagement, the relationship, all of it was positioning for this. The engagement was arranged by your families, true. But Victoria's been playing a longer game than anyone realized. She never intended to actually marry you. She intended to control the company through you, and when that failed, to remove you and take control directly. "Do you have proof she orchestrated my removal?" Richard pulled out a series of emails, heavily encrypted but eventually cracked by their IT team. Victoria and Jonathan, planning every move. The complaints against Aaliyah, designed to force Alexander's hand. The junior executive accidentally discovering Alexander in disguise. The tabloid leak. All of it choreographed. "She's been pulling strings for months," Richard said. "Maybe years. Your undercover stint with Aaliyah just gave her the perfect opportunity to execute." Alexander should have felt vindicated. Should have been energized by the ammunition he now held. Instead, he just felt tired. Set up a meeting with the board. All of them. Friday morning. His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm going to bury her." "And Aaliyah? Are you going to tell her?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "She's finally got a chance at her dream. I'm not dragging her back into this corporate warfare. She deserves better than to be a pawn in my revenge plot. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but wisely stayed silent. That night, Alexander stood in his penthouse, looking out at Chicago's glittering skyline, and allowed himself to imagine a different version of how things could have gone. A version where he'd been honest from the start. Where he'd walked into that diner as himself, not as Alex, and simply asked Aaliyah out on a date. Where he'd introduced her to his world slowly, carefully, letting her choose whether she wanted to be part of it. In that version, maybe she'd be here with him now. Maybe they'd be planning a future instead of nursing wounds and plotting corporate takedowns. But that version didn't exist. This one did, messy, broken, full of consequences for choices he couldn't take back. His phone rang. An unknown number. He answered without thinking. Mr. Harrington? A young woman's voice, weak but determined. This is Maya Thompson, Aaliyah's sister. Alexander's breath caught. Maya, how are you feeling? Better. Much better, thanks to you. The treatment's working. She paused, and he heard beeping monitors in the background. I'm calling because my sister is stubborn and proud and scared. But I see how she looks when your name comes up. She wants to hate you, but she can't. I don't deserve her forgiveness. Maybe not. But you saved my life. You gave her a career. You loved her, love her, in a way that's obvious even through all the lies. Maya's voice grew stronger. So I'm asking you, as someone who has everything to lose if you hurt her again, do you really love my sister? Or was it just guilt? Alexander closed his eyes, seeing Aaliyah's face in his memory. The way she laughed. The way she talked about Maya with such fierce devotion. The way she'd looked at him in the park, walls coming down, trusting him with her heart. I love her, he said quietly. More than I've ever loved anything. More than the company, more than my reputation, more than my own self-preservation. I would give up everything I have if it meant she could be happy. Then fight for her. Not with money or grand gestures. With truth. With patience. Show her that the person you were pretending to be is actually who you are underneath all the wealth and power. What if it's too late? It's only too late if you give up. Maya's voice held a wisdom beyond her 19 years. My sister's been hurt, but she's not broken. Not yet. Don't let her break. After Maya hung up, Alexander stood in the silence, her words echoing in his head. Fight for her. With truth. With patience. He'd never been patient in his life. He'd been raised to take what he wanted, to move fast and decisively, to view everything as a transaction that could be won or lost. But Aaliyah wasn't a transaction. She was a woman who'd been lied to and betrayed too many times, who'd learned to protect herself by trusting no one. If he wanted her back, and God, he wanted it more than his next breath, he'd have to earn it. Not with money or power or manipulation, but with the one thing he'd never given her before. The complete, unvarnished truth. Over the next several days, a strange parallel existence emerged. Alexander prepared his case against Victoria, gathering evidence and allies for the Friday board meeting that would determine the company's future. And Aaliyah threw herself into her new job at Luminaire, discovering that her talent was real, that Helena's faith in her wasn't misplaced. She thrived. Her designs were fresh, innovative, exactly what the fashion house needed. Helena assigned her to increasingly important projects, trusting her instincts, nurturing her growth. Aaliyah's co-workers welcomed her, particularly a woman named Jasmine Chun who'd been at Luminaire for 5 years and took Aaliyah under her wing. You've got something special, Jasmine said one afternoon, reviewing Aaliyah's latest sketches. Not just technical skill, vision. You see what women need before they know they need it. They became friends quickly, bonding over late nights in the studio and shared dreams of reshaping fashion. And inevitably, Aaliyah found herself confiding about Alexander. He lied to me about everything, Aaliyah said, putting finishing touches on a design that would debut at Chicago Fashion Week. His name, his job, his life. Even his engagement. I don't know what was real and what was performance. But he got you this job, Jasmine pointed out gently. And from what you've said, he paid for Maya's treatment. Those aren't actions of someone who sees you as a project. Maybe. Or maybe it's guilt. Maybe he's trying to pay me off so he can feel better about lying. Or maybe, Jasmine said, meeting Aaliyah's eyes, He loves you and didn't know how else to fix what he broke. Aaliyah wanted to dismiss it. Wanted to maintain her anger, keep her walls up, protect herself from more hurt. But late at night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, she kept coming back to moments that had felt undeniably real. The way Alexander had held her when she cried in the storage room. The way he'd looked at her in the restaurant, like she was the only person in the world. The way his voice had cracked when he said, "I love you," on that terrible sidewalk. Could someone fake all of that? Or had there been truth buried under the lies? She didn't have answers. Just confusion and anger and a traitorous part of her heart that missed him despite everything. Friday morning arrived with the weight of reckoning. Alexander walked into the Harrington Enterprises boardroom at precisely 9 a.m., flanked by his lawyer and carrying a briefcase full of Victoria's sins. The full board was assembled, confusion evident on most faces. They'd been told this was an emergency meeting called by Alexander, the now former CEO who technically still held his board seat and voting rights. Victoria sat at what had been Alexander's place at the head of the table, Jonathan Steele beside her like a loyal guard dog. When she saw Alexander, something flickered across her face. Not quite fear, but the first stirrings of uncertainty. "Alexander," she said smoothly, "this is irregular. You're no longer." "I'm still a board member. Still a majority shareholder. Which means I can call meetings." He set his briefcase on the table with a deliberate thud. "And I have some things the board needs to see." Jonathan leaned forward, his silver hair catching the morning light. "If this is some desperate attempt to reclaim your position." "It's not about me." Alexander pulled out the first folder, began distributing copies around the table. "It's about her." For the next hour, Alexander systematically dismantled Victoria's carefully constructed facade. The kickbacks, documented with bank transfers and witness testimony. The embezzlement, proven through forensic accounting. The insider trading, confirmed by time-stamped emails and suspicious stock transactions. The blackmail of board members, recorded in conversations Victoria had assumed were private. Each revelation was met with increasingly shocked silence. Board members who'd voted to remove Alexander just days ago now looked horrified, betrayed, calculating how this scandal would affect their own reputations. "This is fabricated," Victoria said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Alexander is bitter about losing his position. He's manufacturing evidence." From 6 different independent sources. Richard, Alexander's lawyer, interjected. "Including the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, which has been investigating Harrington Enterprises for the past 3 months. They were quite interested in Ms. Langford's activities." That was a bluff. The FBI wasn't actually involved yet, but it landed like a bomb. Victoria's face went white. "Your real plan," Alexander continued, his voice cold and clinical, "was never about protecting the company. It was about taking it. You and Jonathan have been plotting this takeover for years. My father's death just accelerated your timeline." He pulled out the final set of documents, the emails between Victoria and Jonathan, their careful choreography of Alexander's downfall, their plans for restructuring the company once they had full control. "The complaints against Aaliyah? Orchestrated by you to force my hand. The junior executive, accidentally discovering me? Paid by you to be in the right place at the right time. The tabloid leak? Your PR firm." Alexander's hands were steady, but fury burned beneath his surface calm. "You used her as a pawn to destroy me. And that, Victoria, is where you made your mistake." Jonathan was already standing, distancing himself. "I had no knowledge of the financial improprieties. My alliance with Ms. Langford was purely strategic." "Sit down, Jonathan. I have a separate folder just for you." Alexander's smile was sharp. "Turns out you've been taking kickbacks too. Just more carefully hidden than Victoria's." The boardroom erupted. Board members shouting over each other, demanding explanations, threatening lawsuits. Victoria sat frozen, her perfect composure finally cracking, her eyes darting between the exits like a trapped animal. "I'm calling a vote," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Motion to remove Victoria Langford from the board and all company positions, effective immediately. Pending criminal investigation." "Seconded," said Martin Chun, who'd voted against Alexander just days ago but now looked furious at being deceived. The vote was unanimous. 12 hands, including Alexander's. A second motion, removing Jonathan Steele. Also unanimous. A third motion, reinstating Alexander Harrington as CEO. 11 votes in favor. 1 abstention, Alexander's own, because he wasn't sure he wanted the position back. Wasn't sure he deserved it after everything he'd done. But it passed anyway. Just like that, he was CEO again, and Victoria was finished. As security escorted Victoria and Jonathan from the building, as lawyers began drafting statements and board members scrambled to control the narrative, Alexander stood at the window of his reclaimed office and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no sense of justice served. He'd won the corporate war. But he'd lost the only battle that actually mattered. His phone buzzed. A news alert. The story was already breaking. Harrington Enterprises VP ousted in financial scandal. Within minutes, it would be everywhere. Victoria's face plastered across business news, her career destroyed, possibly her freedom depending on what prosecutors decided to pursue. Another buzz. A text from an unknown number. I'm watching the news. I'm sorry this happened to your company. Despite everything, I know you built something you were proud of. Aaliyah. She was reaching out, even after everything, even when she had every right to never speak to him again. Alexander's hands shook as he typed a response. Can I call you? Please. Just to talk. No expectations, no ulterior motives. I just want to hear your voice. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, okay. Give me an hour. I'm at work. That hour was the longest of Alexander's life. He tried to work, to respond to the dozens of emails pouring in about Victoria's removal, to reassure investors that the company was stable. But his mind kept circling back to what he would say, how he could possibly explain himself in a way that didn't sound like excuses. When his phone finally rang, Aaliyah's number on the screen, his heart nearly stopped. Hi, he said, then immediately felt stupid. Hi. That was the best he could do? Hi. Her voice was careful, guarded. Helena gave me a break. I've got 20 minutes. Thank you. For answering. I know you don't owe me anything. I don't. But Maya called you, didn't she? She told me this morning. Said she was meddling but didn't care because we were both too stubborn to figure this out ourselves. Despite everything, Alexander felt a smile tug at his lips. She's wise beyond her years. She is. A pause, heavy with everything unsaid. Alexander, why did you really do it? The undercover thing. Was it really just about the diner acquisition? This was his chance. Truth, like Maya had said. Complete, unvarnished truth. At first, yes. It was business. I wanted to understand the property before we bought it. Wanted to see it without the filter of consultants and reports. But the moment I walked in and saw you, he stopped, gathering courage. Everything changed. You were so real, so genuine in a world where everyone I knew wore masks. I meant to stay a week. I stayed 3 months because I couldn't leave. Because talking to you became the best part of my day. Because you made me want to be the person I was pretending to be, someone uncomplicated, someone worthy of your time. But you had a fiancé. A business arrangement I never wanted. Victoria and I were engaged because our families decided it was strategic. There was never love there, never even affection. Just mutual ambition. I know that doesn't excuse the lie, but I want you to understand, there was never anyone but you. Not really. Silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient noise of Aaliyah's fashion studio in the background. I watched the press conference, she said finally. When you lost your position. You looked destroyed. And I hated that I cared. I wanted to keep hating you, keep my walls up, but I couldn't stop thinking about what you must be feeling. I deserved to lose it. I'd lost focus, lost perspective. I hurt you in pursuit of something I thought I wanted, then realized too late that what I actually wanted was standing right in front of me the whole time. The treatment for Maya. The job at Luminaire. That was all you, wasn't it? The treatment, yes. I couldn't let her suffer because of my mistakes. But the job, Aaliyah, that was your talent. I just sent your designs to someone who could recognize brilliance when she saw it. Helena would never have hired you if your work wasn't exceptional. You still had no right to take my sketches without permission. I know. I violated your privacy, your trust. I'm sorry. I couldn't watch you waste your talent when I had the power to open a door. Another pause. Then, so quietly he almost didn't hear, I start crying at random times. Usually at work, which is mortifying. Jasmine has to cover for me. And it's not even about the lying anymore, not really. It's about the fact that I let myself care. That I broke my own rules and fell for someone who turned out to be exactly what I was afraid of. Alexander's chest ached. I'm not Marcus. I never cheated on you, never wanted anyone else. My only crime was being too much of a coward to tell you who I really was. That's not a small crime, Alexander. You let me believe you were struggling like me. That we were equals, both trying to survive in a city that doesn't care. And then I find out you're a billionaire who was playing dress-up. How am I supposed to trust that any of it was real? Because the feelings were real. The conversations, the connection, that wasn't an act. I've never been more myself than I was with you, even though I was lying about my name and my job. The person I was with you, that's who I want to be. Not the CEO, not the heir, not my father's son. Just someone who loves you and wants to deserve you. He heard a sharp intake of breath, a sound that might have been a stifled sob. I need time, Aaliyah said, her voice thick with emotion. I need space to figure out if I can forgive this. Because part of me wants to. But another part is terrified that if I let you back in, you'll just break me worse the second time. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes, and if the answer is never, I'll accept that too. You deserve someone who treats you with honesty from the start, and if you decide that's not me, I'll understand. I have to go. Helena's calling me back. Okay. Thank you for talking to me. For giving me even this much. Alexander. Her voice was small, vulnerable. The person you were is Alex, the one who listened to me, who held me when I cried, who made me laugh about stupid things. Was that real? That was the most real I've ever been. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll call you. Eventually. When I've figured out what I'm feeling. Don't call me first. Let me come to you. I promise. After she hung up, Alexander sat at his desk, the CEO desk he'd fought to reclaim, and realized the victory felt hollow without her. He'd won back his company, destroyed his enemies, proven himself capable of the ruthlessness his position required. But Maya was right. None of it mattered if he lost Aaliyah in the process. The days that followed were strange and disjointed. Alexander threw himself into repairing Harrington Enterprises' reputation, doing press interviews about Victoria's betrayal, reassuring investors and employees that the company was stable. He worked 18-hour days, barely slept, used exhaustion as a shield against thinking too much about Aaliyah. But she was everywhere anyway. In the coffee he drank black because that's how she took hers when money was tight. In the fashion news that mentioned Luminaire's exciting new designer. In the diner he still owned but couldn't bring himself to visit. Victoria's legal troubles mounted, criminal charges filed, SEC investigation opened, her assets frozen pending trial. Alexander felt no satisfaction watching her fall. Just a distant sadness that it had come to this, that ambition and deception had destroyed what could have been a functional partnership if either of them had been honest from the start. Jonathan Steele quietly resigned from all his board positions, negotiating a settlement that kept him out of prison but ruined him professionally. The remaining board members rallied around Alexander, grateful he'd exposed the corruption, eager to prove their loyalty. But Alexander knew better than to trust that loyalty. They'd turned on him once. They could do it again. On the 8th day after his phone call with Aaliyah, he received an unexpected visitor at his office. Maya Thompson, looking healthier than he'd ever seen her, walked in with a kind of determination that reminded him painfully of her sister. I have something to say, Maya announced, settling into the chair across from his desk like she owned the place. And you're going to listen. Of course. My sister is in love with you. She won't admit it, even to herself, but I see it every time your name comes up. She gets this look, hurt and angry and longing all mixed together. It's actually kind of pathetic to watch. Alexander winced. Maya. Let me finish. She's in love with you, but she's also terrified. Because the last time she loved someone, he destroyed her. And now you've done the same thing, just in a different way. So if you really love her like you told me on the phone, You need to prove it. Not with money or jobs or grand gestures. With patience. With showing up. With being the person she needs, not the person you think she wants. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what she needs. She needs to see that you're willing to be vulnerable too. That you're not just some powerful CEO who can manipulate circumstances. She needs to see you scared and uncertain and real. Maya leaned forward. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to write her a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. And you're going to tell her everything. Every mistake you've made, every fear you have, every reason you fell in love with her. No manipulation, no strategy. Just truth. And if she doesn't respond? Then you write another one. And another. Until she either believes you or tells you to stop. But you don't give up. My sister has spent her entire life with people giving up on her. Our parents died, Marcus betrayed her, the city keeps trying to crush her. Don't be another person who walks away. After Maya left, Alexander sat at his desk with a blank piece of paper and a pen, tools he hadn't used for actual writing in years. Everything was digital now, typed and edited and perfect. But Maya was right. Aaliyah deserved something real, something imperfect, something that showed he was willing to be vulnerable. He started writing. The first letter was terrible. Too formal, too careful, too much like a business proposal. He crumpled it up and started again. The second was too emotional, raw in ways that felt manipulative. The third was too long, rambling, incoherent. On the fourth try, he found his voice. Not Alexander the CEO, not Alex the disguise, but somewhere in between. Just a man who'd made terrible mistakes and was trying to find his way back to something real. Dear Aaliyah, it began. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll throw it away the moment you see my name. But I'm writing it anyway, because Maya told me to, and because I need you to understand something. I've spent my entire life being what other people expected. My father's heir. The board's CEO. Victoria's fiancé. I wore those roles like armor, never letting anyone see who I actually was underneath. And then I met you, and for the first time, I wanted to be seen. Not as Alexander Harrington with his billions and his empire. Just as someone who could make you smile, who could listen when you needed to talk, who could be worthy of your time. I know I failed. I know the lying was unforgivable. But I need you to know that every moment with you was real. Every conversation, every laugh, every time I held your hand, that was me, not the disguise. The person I was with you is who I want to be. And if you give me another chance, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. He went on for 3 pages, his handwriting getting messier as emotion took over, crossing out words and starting over, making it human and imperfect and true. When he finished, he sealed it in an envelope and had his assistant hand-deliver it to Luminaire's offices, with strict instructions that it was personal and should go directly to Aaliyah. Then he waited. 1 day passed. Then 2. Then 3. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered immediately. I got your letter, Aaliyah said without preamble. I've read it 17 times. I can't decide if it's the most romantic thing anyone's ever written or the most manipulative. It's just the truth. That's all I have left to give you. Jasmine says I should forgive you. Maya says I should forgive you. Helena even cornered me yesterday and gave me a speech about how life's too short to let pride ruin something real. Aaliyah's laugh was watery. Everyone in my life seems to think I'm being stubborn. You have every right to be stubborn. I broke your trust. You did. But you also saved Maya's life. You gave me my dream job. You wrote me a letter that made me cry in the middle of the studio and embarrass myself in front of the entire design team. She paused. I want to see you. Not talk on the phone. Actually see you. Face to face. Alexander's heart nearly stopped. When? Tomorrow. There's a place, Millennium Park, by the Bean. Meet me there at noon. And Alexander? Come as yourself. Not Alex, not the CEO. Just you. The next day was Saturday, and Alexander spent an hour agonizing over what to wear. Not a suit, too corporate, too much like the person who'd hurt her. Not the Alex disguise, that would be insulting, a reminder of the lie. Finally, he settled on jeans and a simple sweater, casual but himself, no pretense. He arrived at Millennium Park 15 minutes early, his stomach in knots. The bean gleamed in the autumn sunlight, reflecting distorted images of tourists and locals enjoying the unseasonably warm day. He found a bench with a view and waited. Aaliyah appeared exactly at noon, walking toward him with a confidence he hadn't seen before. She was wearing one of her own designs. He could tell by the unique cut, the way it married African prints with contemporary styling. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, her makeup minimal, and she was absolutely breathtaking. "Hi," she said, sitting down beside him but maintaining careful distance. "Hi. That dress is incredible. Your design." A small smile. "First piece from my new collection. Helena wants to feature it in Chicago Fashion Week next month." "Congratulations. You deserve it." They sat in silence for a moment, watching tourists take selfies with the bean, the city moving around them in its perpetual rhythm. "I'm scared," Aaliyah said finally. "I'm scared that if I forgive you, I'm being weak. That I'm letting you walk all over me like Marcus did. That I'm setting myself up to be hurt worse the next time. I can't promise I won't hurt you again. I'm human, I'll make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never lie to you. Never hide who I am. And if you decide to take this chance, I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it. I don't want your money. I don't want you to solve my problems or swoop in like some hero. I need to know you see me as an equal, not a project. You've never been a project. From the first conversation, you've been someone who challenged me, who saw through my bullshit, who made me want to be better. You're the strongest person I know, Aaliyah. You don't need saving. You never did." She turned to look at him fully for the first time, her brown eyes searching his face for signs of deception. "Who are you really, Alexander Harrington? Not the CEO, not Alex. Who are you?" He thought about it, really thought about it. "I'm someone trying to figure out how to be good. Trying to build something better than my father did. Trying to deserve the second chances people keep giving me." He met her gaze. "And I'm someone who fell in love with a woman in a diner, who changed my entire life in 3 months, who makes me believe I can be better than I am." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. "I want to hate you. It would be so much easier if I could just hate you. But you can't." "No, I can't. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the hurt, you saw me. Really saw me. And that's all I've ever wanted, to be seen." Alexander reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. "I see you. I've always seen you." "I'm not saying yes," she said quickly. "I'm not saying we're together or that everything's forgiven. But I'm saying maybe. I'm saying let's try. Slowly. Honestly. No more disguises, no more games." "No more disguises," Alexander agreed. "Just us, figuring it out as we go." They sat there for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Aaliyah told him about her work at Luminaire, the collection she was designing, her dreams of eventually starting her own line. Alexander told her about restructuring Harrington Enterprises, about trying to build a company culture his mother would have been proud of, about the therapy he'd started to deal with his father's toxic legacy. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, moments of tension when the hurt rose to the surface. But it was real and honest, and more than Alexander had dared to hope for. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Aaliyah stood to leave. "I should go. Maya's expecting me for dinner. Can I see you again? Properly, like a real date?" She smiled, genuinely this time. "Yes. But you're buying me actual dinner, not diner food. And you're telling me stories about your real life, the embarrassing ones, the ones that make you human. Deal." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Alexander? Thank you for the letter. For being honest. It meant more than you know." Then she was gone, disappearing into the Chicago evening, and Alexander sat on the bench feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But hope, as he was about to discover, was a fragile thing. And there were forces still in motion that neither of them had accounted for. That night, as Aaliyah was leaving Maya's hospital room after dinner, she was approached by a man in an expensive suit. He handed her an envelope with a law firm's logo embossed on the front. "Ms. Thompson? You've been served." Inside was a lawsuit. Victoria Langford, even in her disgrace, had filed a defamation suit against Aaliyah, claiming she'd seduced Alexander to gain access to company secrets and advance her career. The suit demanded $2 million in damages and requested a restraining order preventing Aaliyah from contacting any Harrington Enterprises personnel. It was nonsense, obviously, baseless claims that would never hold up in court. But the process would be expensive, public, humiliating. Victoria's final act of revenge, designed to destroy Aaliyah even as Victoria's own world burned. Aaliyah stood in the hospital parking lot, the lawsuit trembling in her hands, and felt the fragile hope she'd just allowed herself collapse into dust. Her phone rang. Alexander's number. She answered, her voice hollow. "I just got served with a lawsuit. Your ex-fiancée is suing me for $2 million. She's claiming I seduced you for corporate secrets." Silence on the other end. Then, she's desperate. "It won't stick. I'll have my lawyers." No. Aaliyah's voice was firm. "No more fixing things. No more swooping in to save me. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try, I need to fight my own battles." "Aaliyah, you can't afford." "I know I can't afford it. I know it'll probably bury me. But I need to do this myself. Can you understand that?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. I understand. But at least let me recommend a lawyer. Someone who'll work pro bono, who'll take the case because it's righteous, not because I'm paying them." It was a compromise. Not ideal, but better than being rescued. "Okay," Aaliyah said finally. "Send me the name." "I'm sorry. For all of this. Victoria should be in prison, not filing frivolous lawsuits. It's not your fault. Not this part, anyway." She looked up at the hospital where Maya was recovering, at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. "I should go. Wait. Our date. Tomorrow night. Are we still?" Aaliyah thought about it. About the lawsuit, the humiliation, the exhaustion of fighting. About how easy it would be to just give up, to push Alexander away and retreat back into her protective walls. And then she thought about his letter. About his face in the park. About the fact that everyone who loved her was telling her to take this chance. "Yes," she said. "We're still on. Pick me up at 7. And Alexander? Don't be late." She hung up before he could respond, a small smile playing at her lips despite everything. The war wasn't over. Victoria's lawsuit was just the beginning of what would likely be a long, painful battle. Aaliyah's relationship with Alexander was tentative at best, built on shaky ground and requiring constant nurturing. Maya's health was improving but not guaranteed. The fashion industry was cutthroat, and Aaliyah's success at Luminaire was still fragile. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Aaliyah felt like she was fighting for something worth having. Not just survival, not just Maya's health, but her own happiness. Her own dreams. Her own chance at love, messy and complicated as it was. She climbed into her battered Honda, the one that barely ran, and drove home through Chicago's evening traffic. Tomorrow she'd deal with the lawsuit. Tomorrow she'd navigate the treacherous waters of dating a billionaire while maintaining her independence. Tonight, she'd allow herself to hope. Just a little. Just enough to see what came next. Because maybe, just maybe, this story didn't have to end in heartbreak. Maybe, with enough honesty and patience and willingness to be vulnerable, it could end in something neither of them had ever expected. Something real. The glass doors of Harrington Enterprises gleamed like ice in the morning sun, all steel and sophistication, the kind of building that made you feel small just by looking at it. Aaliyah stood on the sidewalk outside, staring up at the 50th floor where she knew Victoria Langford sat in her corner office, probably sipping champagne and congratulating herself on a job well done. 3 months had passed since Alexander's confession in the park. 3 months since the scandal broke. 3 months since Aaliyah's face had been plastered across every tabloid with headlines that made her stomach turn. Disgraced CEO's secret affair. From waitress to homewrecker. The woman who destroyed a billionaire. She'd spent those months trying to rebuild. Her job at the fashion house was everything she dreamed of: creative freedom, respect, a salary that meant Maya could have the best doctors without Aaliyah lying awake at night calculating pennies. But the whispers followed her everywhere. The looks from co-workers who wondered if she'd slept her way into the position. The clients who asked pointed questions about her connection to Alexander Harrington. The constant, gnawing fear that everything she'd earned would be taken away because of a man she'd tried so hard to forget. But she couldn't forget him. God, she'd tried. She deleted his number, blocked him on everything, threw herself into work until exhaustion made it impossible to think. And still, late at night when the apartment was quiet and Maya was asleep, she'd find herself remembering the way he'd looked at her in that diner like she was the only person who mattered. The gentleness in his voice when she told him about her parents. The fury in his eyes when he'd watched her being humiliated. Real things. True things. Things that existed beneath the lies. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine, her coworker and the closest thing she had to a friend in this new world. You got this. Remember, she's the one who should be scared, not you. Aaliyah took a breath and pushed through the doors. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending into another universe. The lobby had been impressive, but up here everything was hushed and expensive. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than Aaliyah's entire childhood home, assistants who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. She gave her name at the desk, and the receptionist's perfectly painted lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Ms. Langford is expecting you. Top floor, last door on the right. The hallway seemed to stretch forever. With each step, Aaliyah felt the weight of what she was about to do. Jasmine's plan had been simple: record Victoria, get her to confess, use it to clear Alexander's name and expose the truth. But standing here now, about to walk into the lioness's den, simple felt like a distant memory. Her hand found the small recording device in her jacket pocket, the one Jasmine had helped her set up that morning. It was running. Had been since she entered the building. She knocked. Come in. Victoria's office was exactly what Aaliyah had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that screamed power, and Victoria herself behind a desk that looked like it could host a small country's peace negotiations. She was beautiful in that cold, untouchable way. Blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Aaliyah's salary, and eyes like chips of ice. Aaliyah Thompson. Victoria didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake. I have to admit, I'm surprised you had the nerve to show your face here. Aaliyah closed the door behind her and stepped into the room. We need to talk. Do we? Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Aaliyah like she was a particularly interesting insect. I thought I made my position clear. You're a distraction. A phase. Something Alexander needed to get out of his system before returning to reality. You orchestrated everything. Aaliyah's voice was steady, stronger than she felt. The complaints at the diner. My firing. The scandal in the press. All of it. Why? Victoria laughed, and it was a sharp, brittle sound. Why? Because people like you don't belong in our world. You think you can just waltz in with your poverty and your struggles and your wide-eyed innocence and suddenly you're Cinderella? That's not how this works. This isn't about me belonging or not belonging. This is about control. Of course it's about control. Victoria stood now, moving around the desk with the grace of a predator. Everything is about control. Alexander was supposed to be mine. The company was supposed to be mine. I spent 5 years positioning myself, making the right connections, playing the perfect fiancé. And then you happened. I didn't ask for any of this. You didn't have to ask. You just existed, and that was enough. Victoria's mask was cracking now, her voice rising. Do you know what it's like to watch someone look at another person the way Alexander looked at you? Like you hung the moon? Like you were the answer to every question he'd ever had? I worked for that. I earned that. And you just served him coffee and suddenly you were everything. Aaliyah felt something shift in her chest. Not quite pity, but understanding. He was never yours, Victoria. You can't own a person. No. I'm a reminder that he's human. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Because if he's human, if he can feel real things and want real connection, then all your careful planning means nothing. You can't control love. Victoria's composure shattered completely. He was mine. The company was mine. You ruined everything. Do you understand that? Everything I built, everything I worked for, gone because some nobody waitress made him feel things. There it was. The admission. The confession. Aaliyah felt the device in her pocket, still recording, capturing every word. You blacklisted me. You manipulated the board. You leaked the scandal to the press. Of course I did. Victoria's smile was vicious. And I'd do it again. You think this is over? You think you've won? Alexander lost his company. His reputation is in ruins. And you're a punchline. The woman who brought down a billionaire. That's your legacy. Aaliyah pulled out her phone, opened the recording app, and played back the last 30 seconds. Victoria's voice filled the office, crystal clear, admitting everything. Victoria's face went white. You recorded me. You just destroyed yourself. Aaliyah pocketed the phone. I came here to give you a chance to make this right. To tell the truth voluntarily. But you couldn't even do that. You little, Victoria lunged forward, but Aaliyah was already at the door. It's over, Victoria. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. Over. She left Victoria standing there, and for the first time in 3 months, Aaliyah felt like she could breathe. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked Central Park, Alexander Harrington sat in the dark with a bottle of whiskey and the ruins of his life. The apartment was a mess, empty glasses on every surface, clothes scattered, mail piled up unopened. He'd stopped shaving 2 weeks ago. Stopped answering calls. Stopped pretending that any of this mattered. The board had voted him out 3 days after the scandal broke. Victoria had stood in that conference room with tears in her eyes, fake tears he knew now, but convincing enough, and told them all how Alexander had become emotionally unstable, how his reckless behavior was putting the company at risk. Jonathan Steele had backed her up, presenting a motion to remove Alexander as CEO and install Victoria as interim leader until stability could be restored. 23-7. That's how the vote had gone. 23 board members willing to throw him away like garbage. 7 who'd abstained, too afraid to take a side. Not a single vote in his favor. His father would have laughed. William Harrington had built this empire on the backs of people he'd used and discarded, had died in his sleep surrounded by wealth and utterly alone. Alexander had spent his whole life trying to be different, trying to be better. And in the end, he'd failed in a way that was almost poetic. He'd fallen in love with the one person he'd been lying to, and the truth had destroyed them both. The knock on the door was unexpected. Alexander ignored it. He'd been ignoring everything. Calls from his lawyers, messages from former colleagues offering hollow sympathy, even the worried texts from Bernie, the old diner owner who'd somehow gotten his personal number. The knock came again, more insistent. Alexander Harrington, I know you're in there, and I know you're wallowing in self-pity like a damn fool. Open this door before I get the building manager to do it for me. Bernie. Of course it was Bernie. Alexander dragged himself to the door and opened it. Bernie stood there in his old jacket, looking exactly the same as he had in the diner. Gruff, solid, real. He took one look at Alexander and shook his head. Jesus. You look like hell. Thanks. What do you want? Bernie pushed past him into the apartment, surveying the damage. I want to know when you became your father. That got Alexander's attention. I'm nothing like my father. No? Because from where I'm standing, you're doing a pretty good impression. Man loses everything, crawls into a bottle, gives up on the one thing that actually mattered. Your old man did that every time things got hard. Difference was, he had nothing worth fighting for. You do. I don't have anything, Bernie. They took the company. They took my reputation. And Aaliyah, his voice cracked. She's better off without me. That girl came into my diner every day for 3 years. Worked herself to the bone, never complained, always had a smile even when I knew she was dying inside. You know why? Because she was fighting for something real. Her sister. Her future. Her dreams. She didn't give up when things got hard, and they got pretty damn hard. What's your point? My point is that you're a fool. But you're not your father. He never fought for anything real. Never put himself on the line for another person. Never cared about anything except power and control. Bernie moved closer, his voice softening. Love isn't about being perfect, son. It's about showing up. Your father never showed up. Not for your mother, not for you, not for anyone. But you can. Question is, will you? Alexander sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this. Start by taking a shower. Then start by being honest, With yourself, with her, with everyone. The truth is the only thing you've got left. Might as well use it. After Bernie left, Alexander sat in the silence for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. Bernie was right. He looked like hell. But more than that, he looked like a man who'd given up. And somewhere in this city, Aaliyah was still fighting. He turned on the shower. It was a start. Aaliyah's hands shook as she knocked on the penthouse door. She'd been standing in the hallway for 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage, the recording device now safely backed up to 3 different locations thanks to Jasmine's paranoia. The device that contained Victoria's confession, her admission of everything, the sabotage, the manipulation, the calculated destruction of both Alexander's career and Aaliyah's reputation. The door opened. Alexander stood there, and Aaliyah's breath caught. He looked different, tired, yes, but also somehow more present than he'd been in the park. His hair was wet like he'd just showered, he'd shaved, and his eyes when they met hers were clear. Aaliyah. He said her name like a prayer. What are you? She held up her phone. I have something you need to hear. They sat in his living room, and she played the recording. All of it. Victoria's confession, her admission of orchestrating everything, her rage and jealousy laid bare. Alexander listened without interrupting, and when it was finished, he was silent for a long moment. She destroyed us, he finally said. She destroyed everything. No. She destroyed what you had. But that was already broken, wasn't it? The company, the engagement, all of it. It was built on lies and power plays and people treating each other like chess pieces. Aaliyah leaned forward. Use this. Take back what's yours. Not the version Victoria wanted, but the version that's real. I don't want the company if I don't have you. The words hung in the air between them. Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Then fight for both. Prove you're not the man who lied to me in that diner. Be the man who stands up. Be the man who chooses truth, even when it's hard. Even when it costs you everything. Alexander reached for her hand, and she let him take it. I don't deserve you. No. You probably don't. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because Victoria Langford doesn't get to win. She doesn't get to destroy people's lives and walk away clean. And I'm doing this because somewhere under all the lies, I still believe in the man who stood up for me when I needed it most. His phone rang. A number he recognized, one of the board members who'd abstained from the vote. Alexander answered, putting it on speaker. Alexander. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Jonathan Steele's financial records have been flagged for irregularities. There's talk of reopening your case. If you have anything at all, that could shed light on what happened, now's the time. Alexander looked at Aaliyah. She nodded. I'll be there, he said. And I won't be alone. The Harrington Enterprises boardroom had never felt colder. The long mahogany table stretched like an execution block, surrounded by men and women in expensive suits, their faces carefully neutral masks of corporate professionalism. Victoria sat at the head of the table, Jonathan Steele to her right, both of them radiating confidence. They thought they'd won. They thought this meeting was a formality. They were wrong. Alexander and Aaliyah walked in together, hand in hand, and the room went silent. Victoria's face twitched, the first crack in her composure. Jonathan Steele's eyes narrowed. The board chairman, Thomas Whitfield, cleared his throat. Mr. Harrington. Ms. Thompson. Please sit. They took their seats across from Victoria. Alexander pulled out a small recording device and set it on the table. Before we discuss the financial irregularities in Mr. Steele's accounts, I think the board should hear something. This recording was made yesterday in Ms. Langford's office. Ms. Thompson was present and can verify its authenticity. He pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, crystal clear, admitting everything. The blacklisting. The manipulation. The deliberate sabotage of Aaliyah's career and the calculated destruction of Alexander's reputation. With each sentence, the board members' faces shifted from neutral to shocked to horrified. When Victoria's final words, he was mine. The company was mine. You ruined everything. Echoed through the room, the silence that followed was deafening. Victoria was on her feet. That recording is inadmissible. I didn't consent to being recorded. You can't. Actually, Aaliyah said quietly, New York is a one-party consent state. I was present, I was part of the conversation, and I had every legal right to record it. I checked with 3 lawyers before I came to your office. Jonathan Steele tried to salvage the situation. This is clearly a setup. Ms. Langford was under duress, provoked into. Jonathan. Thomas Whitfield's voice cut through the room like a blade. He was an old man, 70 if he was a day, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every corporate game ever played. I suggest you stop talking. Our forensic accountants have spent the last 72 hours examining your financial records. The offshore accounts, the embezzled funds, the kickbacks from vendors, all of it. You've been stealing from this company for 3 years. Jonathan's face went white. That's not, I can explain. No, you can't. Thomas turned to Victoria. And you, Ms. Langford. I've known you since you were 22 years old. Watched you climb this ladder. I always thought you were ambitious, but I never took you for cruel. The things you said on that recording, the things you did to this young woman, are beyond the pale. Victoria's composure cracked completely. You think you've won? She was looking at Alexander now, venom in her eyes. You're weak, Alexander. Just like your father. He destroyed everything he touched, and so will you. Alexander stood slowly. No. My father hid. He built walls and told lies and hurt people because he was too afraid to face the truth. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm owning my mistakes. Yes, I lied to Aaliyah. Yes, I went undercover and compromised my judgment. Yes, I should have been honest from the start. But I'm being honest now. And that's the difference between me and him. Thomas Whitfield nodded. The board will now vote on 2 motions. First, the removal of Jonathan Steele and Victoria Langford from their positions and from the board itself, effective immediately. Second, the reinstatement of Alexander Harrington as CEO, with new oversight protocols, transparency requirements, and an independent ethics committee to ensure nothing like this happens again. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. Victoria and Jonathan were escorted out by security. As Victoria passed Aaliyah, she leaned close and hissed, "He'll tire of you. Men like him always do." Aaliyah looked her in the eye. Maybe. But at least I'll know I was brave enough to try. Can you say the same? Victoria had no answer. The door closed behind her, and she was gone. Thomas Whitfield approached Aaliyah. Ms. Thompson. You've shown remarkable courage and integrity in all of this. Harrington Enterprises could use more people like you. I'd like to offer you a brand partnership, your fashion line, featured exclusively in our luxury hotels worldwide. Full creative control, generous compensation, and a platform that could launch your career to the next level. Aaliyah stared at him. I need to think about it. Take your time. The offer stands. The boardroom emptied, leaving Alexander and Aaliyah alone among the leather chairs and the weight of everything that had just happened. They stood facing each other, and for the first time in 3 months, there was nothing between them. No lies. No secrets. Just 2 people who'd been through hell and somehow come out the other side. So, Alexander said softly, what now? Aaliyah didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time since that night in the diner, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could figure it out together. Time moved differently after that. Not slower, not faster, just different. Intentional. Alexander and Aaliyah took things slow, and slow felt like a revelation after everything that had burned so hot and so fast before. They met for coffee at the diner, Bernie's place, renovated now but still keeping its soul. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. About Alexander's childhood growing up in the shadow of a man who measured worth in dollars. About Aaliyah's parents and the car crash that took them on a rainy Tuesday when she was 16. About fear and trust and the strange, terrifying hope that maybe broken people could help each other heal. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Alexander met Meyer officially. No pretense, no lies, just the truth laid bare. I'm Alexander, he said, standing in her hospital room with flowers that Meyer immediately declared were trying too hard. I made mistakes. A lot of them. I'm trying to be better. Maya studied him with eyes that were sharper than her 19 years should allow. She'd been through too much, the illness, the treatments, watching her sister sacrifice everything, not to see through people. You hurt her. I did. You going to do it again? I'm going to try my hardest not to. Maya looked at Aaliyah, then back at Alexander. Don't screw this up. She doesn't let people in. If she's letting you in, it's because she sees something worth fighting for. Prove her right. I will. Good. Now get out. Grey's Anatomy is on in 5 minutes and I watched that alone. As they left the hospital, Aaliyah was smiling. She likes you. She threatened me. That means she likes you. Aaliyah's career exploded in ways she'd never dreamed possible. The brand partnership with Harrington Enterprises was just the beginning. Fashion magazines wanted interviews, boutiques wanted her designs, and 6 months after that terrible night in the diner, she stood backstage at her first real show with her heart trying to pound its way out of her chest. You're going to be amazing, Jasmine whispered, squeezing her hand. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. And one by one, models walked the runway wearing Aaliyah's creations. Pieces that told stories of struggle and hope, of Southside Chicago streets and dreams that refused to die, of a girl who'd raised her sister and buried her own aspirations until a lie forced her to face the truth. Alexander sat in the front row, and when Aaliyah finally took her bow to a standing ovation, their eyes met across the crowd. He was crying. She was crying. And somehow, impossibly, they were here. After the show, in the quiet chaos of the after-party, Alexander pulled her aside. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? This has nothing to do with me or my company or any of it. This is all you. It's not all me. You submitted my designs when I was too scared to do it myself. You created them. I just put them in front of the right people. There's a difference. She kissed him then, quick and soft, and whispered against his lips, "Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Alexander threw himself into changing Harrington Enterprises from the inside out. New policies, new oversight, new values. Fair wages for hotel staff. Transparency in vendor contracts. An ethics hotline that actually meant something. The board watched him carefully, waiting for him to fail, but slowly, grudgingly, they began to see that he meant it. He gave a press conference 6 months after his reinstatement. Standing at a podium with cameras flashing, he said the words he'd been practicing for weeks. I lost my way. I made choices that hurt people I cared about, and I let power become more important than principles. Someone reminded me what matters. People, not just profits. Integrity, not just image. Truth, not just transactions. Harrington Enterprises is changing because I'm changing. And we're going to prove that a company can be successful without compromising its soul. The questions came fast and brutal, but Alexander answered everyone honestly. When a reporter asked about Aaliyah, he didn't deflect. She's the reason I'm standing here. Not because she fixed me, no one can fix another person. But because she showed me what it looks like to fight for something real. To be brave when everything is falling apart. I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, and she called me on it. Best thing that ever happened to me. The company's reputation rebuilt slowly. Trust wasn't bought overnight, but brick by brick, quarter by quarter, Harrington Enterprises became known for something other than scandal. On a Tuesday night 6 months after the fashion show, Aaliyah and Alexander sat on the fire escape of her apartment, a nicer place now, but she'd kept it, like the reminder of where she came from. They talked about his father, about the affairs and the cruelty and the loneliness that William Harrington had died with. I used to think I was destined to become him, Alexander said quietly. Like it was genetic or something. The lying, the hiding, the using people. You're not him. How do you know? Because you're here. Because when you realized you'd hurt me, you didn't run. You didn't hide. You faced it. Aaliyah leaned her head on his shoulder. We're both scared. Of being hurt, of making mistakes, of becoming the people who broke us. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means we're paying attention. He kissed her then, under the city lights, and it felt different than the stolen moments in the diner. No secrets. No lies. Just two people choosing each other despite everything. 6 months after that, Aaliyah opened her apartment door to find Alexander standing there with flowers and a small box. Her heart stopped. I have a question, he said. She braced herself for the weight of a diamond ring. for a proposal she wasn't sure she was ready for the pressure of forever when they were still figuring out today. Will you move in with me? No pressure, no expectations. Just us, figuring it out together. Aaliyah laughed, relief flooding through her. I thought you were proposing. One day. When you're ready. When we're ready. But for now, I just want to wake up next to you and make you terrible coffee and argue about what to watch on Netflix and build something real. Can we do that? She said yes. Maya graduated college on a bright spring morning, walking across that stage in her cap and gown with a smile that could light up the world. Aaliyah and Alexander sat in the audience, and when Maya's name was called, Aaliyah grabbed Alexander's hand and held on tight. She did it, Aaliyah whispered, tears streaming down her face. She actually did it. You did it, Alexander corrected. You made this possible. After the ceremony, Maya announced her plans for medical school. I want to help people like me. Kids who get diagnosed with impossible things and need someone who understands. She looked at Aaliyah. You saved me. Over and over. Now it's my turn to save someone else. Bernie showed up at their apartment a month later with news. I'm retiring. Selling the diner. Figured you two should know first. Alexander and Aaliyah looked at each other. The same thought, the same moment. Don't sell it, Aaliyah said. Not yet. Give us a week. They bought it together, split the cost down the middle, made it official with handshakes and lawyers and Bernie crying into his coffee about kids these days doing something right. They renovated it, kept the bones but changed the heart. It became a community space, free meals for struggling families, a bulletin board for job postings, a warm place where people could come when the world felt cold. The grand reopening fell on the anniversary of that terrible night when Aaliyah had been humiliated and Alexander had walked through the door. A year later, and everything was different. Victoria watched the coverage on TV from her small apartment across town. She'd taken a job at a mid-tier consulting firm, nothing like the empire she'd almost had, and the bitterness sat in her chest like a stone. But watching Aaliyah cut the ribbon, watching the community flood in, watching Alexander look at her like she'd hung every star in the sky, for just a moment, Victoria felt something that might have been regret. She'd had everything. And she'd lost it because she'd never understood that some things couldn't be controlled, couldn't be owned, couldn't be forced. Love wasn't a transaction. It was a risk. And she'd been too afraid to take it. She turned off the TV. At the diner, Aaliyah stood next to Alexander, watching families fill the booths, watching Maya serve as a volunteer, watching Bernie argue with a new cook about proper coffee temperature. The space hummed with life and warmth and hope. You know, Aaliyah said, leaning into Alexander's side, a year ago, I thought my life was over. Standing in this exact spot, being humiliated, losing everything. I was sure that was it. The end. And now. She turned to face him, this man who'd been a stranger, then a liar, then somehow the person who knew her better than anyone. Now I think it's just beginning. All of it. The messy, complicated, beautiful parts. The fear and the hope and everything in between. He kissed her, soft and certain, while the diner buzzed around them. They'd started with lies, but they'd built something true. They'd both been broken, but they'd helped each other heal. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real. And real was enough. Some love stories start with lies. The best ones are brave enough to build truth. What would you do if you discovered the person you love had been living a lie? Share your story below. I read every comment.